completing the square. Okay, so you want to come get rid of that definition. So the definition of completing the square, and this is something Algebra 2 classes are doing right now, is to solve by creating a perfect square. You want to do this to problems that won't factor. So if you try the X method and it doesn't factor, then you can go, we can complete this square, we got this. Problems that won't factor, we make a perfect square. So when we're remembering perfect squares, so this one's for you, Donna. Give me a thumbs up when you're ready, okay? So Donna, our number here is 4. So after our x squared, because we take our first one and we square it, what is 2 times 4? 8. So we double that 4 to get 8. And what is 4 times 4? 16. Awesome. So if that rule applies, Lance, x squared plus 6x plus 9, what does that break into? X plus 3. Because what is half of 6? 5 by 2. Or you can take the square root of 9. Awesome. All right. Here are the steps for completing the square. Step number 1, move the constant over to the other side. So you have just the x's on the left. So go just x's on left. So we're going to add 9 to both sides. So we get x squared plus 4x, leave a space here, equals 9. The next step that we're going to do is we're going to take our b, or the guy that's in front of our normal x. He gets divided by 2. So what is 4 divided by 2? 2. And then we're going to square it. 2 squared is 4. Okay. Step number 2, divide b by 2 and square it. Step number 3, add this number to both sides. You gotta do it to both sides so we remain equal. Because if you only added 4 to one side and not the other, it won't be the same equation. So I'm going to add 4 here, and I'm going to add 4 here. Factor the left side into a perfect square. We did all that work taking the b, dividing by 2, and squaring it, so we can have a perfect square. And x squared plus 4x plus 4, that is, the perfect square that goes into it is x plus 2 squared. So by adding that 4 to both sides, we got x plus 2 perfect square. Then we take the square root of both sides, we're almost done, and solve for x. So This is a square root. This is a square root. The side without the square on it is the plus or minus. Because remember, either one, when we square it, if I squared negative root 13, I'd get 13. If I squared root 13, I'd also get 13. So I need both the plus and the minus. And a squared gets rid of a square root, so we have x plus 2. So that's the square root both sides. So now we're going to solve for x. Gavin, if I have x plus 2, what do I have to do to both sides to get rid of that? Yeah, I have to subtract 2. I go minus 2 and minus 2. Unfortunately, that square root has a powerful bond on that 13. I can't just squeeze that 2 and make it, oh yeah, it's 11 now. The square root is blocking me from adding it to, combining it with the minus 2. So I have to write this as negative 2 plus or minus square root of 13. I cannot combine that negative 2 while the 13 is under the root, unfortunately. So my two answers are, come on, buddy. Can't, no. I have to do it real small. My two answers are x equals negative 2 plus root 13, and x equals negative 2 minus the square root of 13. If for some reason we want to estimate that, we can grab our calculator and go negative 2. Okay, come on, buddy. Negative 2 plus the square root of 13. So that's approximately 1.6. And negative 2 minus 13 is negative 5.6. So the two answers are approximately 1.6 and negative 5.6. Be careful when they ask you to solve. Which way is easier, just leaving the root 13 in there and writing it as it is, or getting your calculator out, making sure you put it in correctly, and then round it correctly, and then make sure you put the squiggly lines so that whoever knows that you know that it's approximate. Which way seems easier? Leave it as the root 13. So most of the time you're going to leave it as root 13 because estimating the square root and then combining it with other numbers adds bigger chance for error. All right. Problem number 1, we're going to find a c value so that x squared minus 16x plus c is a perfect square trinomial. Zoe, I think you are next batter up. So let's, we are on step, if you look at our steps, we are on this step here. We're going to divide b by 2 and split it. So if RB is equal to negative 16, what is half of negative 16? And what is negative 8 squared? Yeah. So our C value is going to be 64. All right, you guys take a moment. I'm going to put 60 seconds on the clock, and you will try these 3 problems here. Pause the recording if you're watching the recording. Here it is. All right, so we're going to take 20, divide it by 2, and square it. That gives us 10 squared, which is 100. Then we're going to take 4, we're going to cut it in half, which is 2, and then square it. 2 squared is 4. C is equal to 4. This one we got negative 12. We're going to cut it in half and then square it. That's negative 6. Squared is 36. It's really important that you note C is always going to be positive, because the second action you do is squaring, and even if B is negative, when you square it, it's going to give you a positive number. So C is always going to be positive. Let's take a look at problem number 2. We need to find the solution to these guys. Remember, if we can't factor it, we're going to complete the square and solve it out. So 2 numbers that multiply to give me 16. Add to give us 14. So 8 and 2. 16 and 1. 4 and 4. Take them all out of factors for 16. Anybody think of any others? Okay, so we know that this isn't factorable. Let's go back to our steps. Step 1 is move the constant, or the number without x's, over to the left and get all the x's on the right. So I'm going to subtract 16 from both sides. Leave a space here, because I'm going to take B, I'm going to divide by 2, and I'm going to square it, and then I'm going to put that in, right in that gap. So we're going to take our B term, which is negative 14. We're going to divide by 2, and we're going to square it. Negative 14 divided by 2 is negative 7. Negative 7 squared is 49 to both sides. 49 to both sides. Then we're going to factor out. We made this perfect square. I made you. I can bring you into this square, then I can take you out. Whose mama says that? I know, I got a weird mom. Okay. So we made this perfect square, so let's write it as a perfect square. Whatever term ends up when you get B divided by 2 goes in your perfect square. So this is x minus 7. That's what goes in your perfect square. Because it's going to be negative 7 that multiplies to give you 49 and adds to give you negative 14. And that is equal to 49 plus 16. Some of you guys forgot your pre-algebra rules. When your signs are different, you subtract the 2 numbers, and whoever number is bigger, you put that sign down. So, but you write the bigger number always first. So 49 minus 16, 16 and 3. And 49 is the bigger number, and it's positive, so it's positive 33. Okay. Let's look at our steps. So we move the constant to the other side and leave a space. We divided B by 2 and squared it. We added this number to both sides. We factored the left side into a perfect square. Now we're here at step number 5. Square root both sides and solve for x. Square root both sides. So it's going to be x minus 7 equals plus or minus root 33. Juliet, how do I get rid of a plus 7? Oh, sorry, how do I get rid of a minus 7?
I forgot.
Opposite of minusing is
Adding.
adding. So we are going to add 7 to both sides. And then because the square root, we can't just go, yeah, it's 40. The square root prevents us from doing anything between, it's keeping our numbers apart. Why, square root? Why? That's just what square root does. Unless it's another exactly the same square root, we can't mess with it. So our answers are x is equal to 7 plus root 33 and 7 minus root 33. You get 2 answers. All right, now it's your turn. See if you can replicate those 5 steps. And I'm going to give you guys, and this time I'm going to give you 90 seconds, minute and a half. We're on Richard. First step, Richard. Not the 4x, the number without the x. Yeah, the 10. We're going to subtract the 10 from both sides. Whoever doesn't have an x gets to move over. You're kicked out of our party. Go away. Leave a space, and 0 minus 10 is negative 10. Boom. All right, Elijah, what's step number 2 in our 5-step process? Yes, divide the 4 by 2 and square it. And what is that when we get to the end? 4. We're going to go ahead and add that to both sides. Let's just double check our steps. Add this number to both sides. That's step 3. Oh, sorry, Morgan, I took that away from you. Step 4, factor the left side into a perfect square. Because that's right, we're masters of this universe. So this here, x squared plus 4x plus 4, factors to what, Miss Morgan? And what's negative 10 plus 4? Yeah. Negative 6. Subtract the 2. 10 is the bigger number. It manages the sign. All right, Diego, what is our next step?
Square root both sides.
Square root both sides. Just for funnies, what's the last step, Wyatt?
Make it x equals negative 2 plus or minus.
Yeah, sorry, I was so disturbed by the negative in the square root. Check this out. If I were to try to find an approximate answer, and I would put negative 6 and I tried to square root it, I know it's tiny, but it says invalid input. When you take the square root, you're trying to say which 2 numbers will multiply to give you negative 6. Which 2 of the same numbers will multiply to give you negative 6? Right, you can't multiply a negative times a negative and get a negative. Welcome to pre-algebra again. A negative and a negative give you a positive, and a positive and a positive give you a positive. So there are no 2 numbers that are the same identical number that you can multiply together and get a negative 6. So this one happens to be no solution. And when we graph it, x squared plus 4x plus 10, so we're going to x squared plus 4x plus 10. X squared plus 4x plus 10. So we're going to graph it. X squared plus 4x plus 10. And look at the picture because sometimes it's easier to see x squared. So x squared plus 4x plus 10 is this guy here. Where does this parabola cross the x-axis? It doesn't. That's why there's no solution. So because we're not looking at the graph of these functions, but we're manipulating them algebraically, we're making perfect squares, which when you do this high level of math, you have to know when the no solutions happen. So if you get a negative underneath the square root, you can automatically say, there's no solution, there's no number that's going to make that function equal to 0. All right. So we're going to do this when we got willy-nilly going on. We're going to look at two different scenarios when the number is already over, and we're going to look at when we can factor stuff. Okay, so we already have our number on the right-hand side, 144. So we need to make a little space here. We don't even have to minus the 144 from both sides, okay? Because it's already over. What is, when we take b, what do we do with that b first? Divide it by 2. And then we square it, okay? And what do we get when we get a big fat 9? Let's go ahead and put the 9 on the other side too. I like to put a placeholder on both sides so that I remember to, when I come back to it, to put a 9 on each side. All right, Marissa, you have to factor x squared plus 6x plus 9. What perfect square does that make? Wait, what? X squared plus 6x plus 9. What perfect square does that make? Yeah. If you get separated from your brain and can't noodle through, it's whatever we get before we square. So 6 divided by 2. 144 plus 9, I can do the math on that. That's 153. Yay. All right, Logan, what's the next step here?
Square both sides.
Square both sides. We get x plus 3 equals plus or minus square root of 153. I've been around the block a few times. Here is 153 is not a perfect square, so we're kind of stuck with it. Laura, what happens next? Minus the 3. Do I need to write the two of them, or are you guys okay knowing that plus is one of them, plus the root 153 is one answer, and minus the root 153 is the other answer? You guys okay? Okay. Watch this crazy scenario here. 0 does a beautiful thing. If I have 0 and I multiply it by a number, Georgie, what is 0 divided by 2? 0. What is 0 times 4? 0. So this equaling 0 does an awesome thing when I have extra factorable coefficients. What can I factor out each one? This is for you, Rudy. Between 2x squared minus 8x and minus 10. What factor do those three things have in common? 2. So we're going to go ahead and take that out. What am I left when I divide 2x squared by 2? 1, and then the x squared stays. Negative 8x divided by 2. Negative 4x. And negative 10 divided by 2. Negative 5. Now, because I am diabolical, I'm going to divide both sides by 2. Zero divided by 2 is 0, and 2 parenthesis x squared minus 4x minus 5 close parenthesis divided by 2 is just x squared minus 4x minus 5. Peyton, are there 2 numbers that will factor when we multiply them and give us -5 when we multiply them, and then add to give us -4?
No, I don't think there are.
What are the factors of 5? It only has
1 to 5.
yeah, -5 and +1. When we add those together, do we get -4? So this is x minus 5 and x plus 1. It's hard because it's what we did last week, and that was so long ago. Thursday, that was like 100 years ago. Leslie, what do we do when we have these parenthesis guys equaling 0? You remember. We take each piece and set it equal to 0 and solve. So we're going to take this x minus 5, set it equal to 0, and the x plus 1, and set it equal to 0. So this is from our last lesson in 9.4. We're going to take each piece of our factored multipliers and set them equal to 0. When we solve them out, we get x is equal to 5 and x is equal to -1. Phew, we didn't have to even complete the square. Yes. Okay, you guys are going to take a moment. Try these 2 problems. This one, we want to bring the x's together. Come back, little birdie. -10x, come back. And then if it's not factorable, we need to send -18 away and complete the square. This one's for my people that their brains don't automatically factor. What number can we factor out from here? Factor out of 3. Then hopefully it's factorable. All right, give it a whirl. I'm going to give you guys 2 minutes, and then we'll come back and check answers. All right, for problem number 1, we add 10x to both sides because we want our x's together, and then we need to see if we can find a number that multiplies to give us -18 and adds to give us 10. Factors of 18 are 1 and 18, 9 and 2, and 3 and 6. And none of those combined together, positive or negative wise, to give us 10. So we have to kick Mr. -18 out. See ya, sucker. We get x squared plus 10x plus a space equals 18 plus that same space. We're going to take 10. We're going to divide it by 2 and square it. 10 divided by 2 is 5. 5 squared is 25. That's what gets added to both sides. Then we factor this guy right here. 18 plus 25 is 85 is 13. Carry the 1 is 43. Okay. X squared plus 5 squared equals 43. We're going to take the square root of both sides. We get x plus 5 equals plus or minus whatever the square root of 43 is. I know my perfect square is 43 is not one of them. And then to solve for x, we're going to subtract 5 from both sides. Don't forget the power of the square root. We cannot put 5 underneath that square root and make them combine with 43. So he just says negative 5 plus root 43 is one of our answers. And negative 5 minus root 43 is our second answer. All right, let's take a look at this guy over here. We're going to factor out a 3. When we do that, we get x squared plus 6x plus 8 equals 0. Let's see if there's a 2 factors. We multiply to give us 8, add to give us 6. What do we think, Connor? 4 and 2. Yay! I don't have to complete the square. We go ahead and factor that. I'm going to bump that 3 out of my life by dividing both sides by 3. Then I got to split it into its 2 possible answers, where the first one is equal to 0 and where the second one is equal to 0. Both of those are possible solutions to this problem. This one is x equals negative 4. This one is x equals negative 2.